timeout.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Kenny, and welcome to ESPN Classic's Top 5 Reasons You Can't Blame, a series that takes a fresh look at sports personalities who are remembered largely for their mistakes, controversial moments, or questionable decisions. In this show, we'll examine the man whose repeated near misses in golf's biggest events have labeled him, forgive the phrase, a choker. We'll count down the top 5 reasons you can't blame Greg Norman for not winning more major championships, reasons that range from a longing to please his father to the allure of a tiger. But before we get to our countdown, let's take a look at Norman under pressure.
What a great shot. That ball was nailed. Beautiful shot. Just perfect, right down the center of the fairway.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, well done. The champion for 1986.
This was a player that lived at the top of the leaderboard. Really quite intimidating to play with because the standards were so high.
Spinning back, look at this.
He came along when people were looking for a new hero, and here came the great white shark.
I say that might have been the championship right there.
In the mid-late 80s, he was totally dominant of the golf world. He was a steady money winner, and he was #1 on the world rankings for 6 years.
He had the ability to hit 2 irons like they were 7 irons. A good putter, tremendous length, tremendous strength.
This is a guy who has the most dominant performances you'd ever want to see, from shooting 24 under at the Players in '94 and blowing away the field.
Between 1986 and 1998, Greg Norman spent 331 weeks ranked #1 in the world. His 86 victories included 2 British Opens, and in 2001, he was voted into the World Golf Hall of Fame. But the flashy and highly talented Australian will be remembered most for all those majors that got away.
I don't think he hit the worst shot of the day. He hit it fat, and it's going to go in the bleachers, for God's sake.
He's had the ability to win quite a few tournaments that he did not win.
Oh, splashed it.
He had a flaw in an Achilles heel, and I think that it was more mental than physical.
Norman's par attempt just off the right edge.
It seemed when he got under pressure, where he'd kind of be very upright, swing underneath it, as soon as the heat really got on, the ball went right.
Got it going right, going way right, headed toward the bunkers right.
He led going into the final round of all 4 majors in 1986. People call that either the Saturday Slam or the Shark Slam, and of course he only won 1 of those tournaments.
The 86 U.S. Open, he's got to lead, and he comes out flat. He talked about it later. He said he just wasn't prepared to be there.
89 British Open, the playoff. He's tied with Mark Calcavecchi, and he's so jacked, he rips a 320-yard drive into a bunker. Who else but Greg Norman would do that? He ends up having to take an X on the hole.
A year later, in 1990, Norman and Nick Faldo started the 3rd round of the British Open tied for the lead. Toward the end of a humiliating collapse in which he would finish 9 strokes down to Faldo's 67, the great white shark floundered by making a biting remark.
We walked up the 17th hole, and Greg said to me, "Well, Bruce, I guess it's better to be lucky than good." And I turned to Greg and I said, "Well, Greg, all I know is that I just want to work for somebody that's got heart."
But if any single tournament defined Norman's star-crossed legacy, it was the Masters.
At the Masters in 1986, he birdied 14, 15, 16, and 17 to go into a tie for the lead with Jack Nicklaus.
He's in the middle of the fairway at 18, has a chance to get into a playoff or maybe win it outright.
Here comes Norman's second shot, and it is going off to the right. It is in the gallery, and Greg Norman is in trouble with his second shot.
Norman's bogey pushed him out of contention as Nicklaus, at 46, won his 6th Masters.
A decade later, the Great White bared his teeth early at Augusta with a historic first-round performance.
In 1996, Greg Norman opened that Masters with 63. He tied the course record. So you felt like from Thursday on that it was Greg Norman's year to finally win the green jacket.
You've started with a 6-shot lead. You've won the tournament, haven't you?
It wasn't so much how's he going to win it, but how was he going to lose it?
You just had the feeling from the minute he hit the first tee shot that things were going to start to go wrong.
Well, he certainly has had a horrible day, and you could just see the confidence ooze out of his body.
All of a sudden you look at the board and you're like, wait a second, Faldo's kind of catching up.
Strokes it on the way to the hole, slides by.
By the 9th hole, Greg played his shot and it dribbled off the front of the green. And we knew then the turnaround was almost complete.
The wheels had come off. Believe me, the whole carriage has gone on fire.
Number 10, he messes up a chip, takes bogey. Number 11, 3 putts inside 12 feet.
My fault, right? Couldn't stop it. It was just a downward spiral. It was just a bad day for me on the golf course, and I could feel it, I could sense it, and it was just terrible.
It was golf's great funeral. I've never been to any sporting event and left a stadium or an arena with that sort of dead silence as there was there.
As the Shark sank into the gloom with a 78, it was Faldo who surfaced with his 3rd Masters title, shooting a closing round of 67.
You have to blame Greg Norman for not winning more major championships. He won 2 British Opens, nice, but he didn't win the ones that we care about, Masters Open, PGA.
What we'll remember is that Norman didn't win, and unfortunately he leaves behind a legacy of almost.
In the case of Norman, it always seemed like there should have been far more than 2 and far fewer than 83 that he did not cash in.
Before we count down the 5 reasons you can't blame Norman for only winning 2 majors, here are a few interesting items that didn't make the short list. We call them the best of the rest.
Nick Faldo. The 6-time major winner's slow pace of play not only kept Norman from making a charge, it turned the Shark into a jellyfish.
You look at the meltdown in 1990 at St. Andrews against Nick Faldo in the 3rd round.
And Faldo shot about 67, and Norman shot about a 76 and was out of it by the middle of the front 9.
Norman was typically a very quick player, and Faldo was extremely deliberate, and that certainly couldn't have helped Norman.
If you're talking about the Masters with Faldo, Greg was trying to probably play his way out of the bad play at the start, but he can't get on that roll because he feels like he's like this all day.
She started to re-grip the club a few more times, and so, it just breaks your rhythm, breaks your flow.
People respected what Faldo did, but nobody enjoyed playing with him.
Our other best of the rest. Nobody's perfect. It happens to the best of them. In the 1966 U.S. Open, Arnold Palmer led Billy Casper by 7 with just 9 holes left.
Palmer had such a big lead, and then it set his sights on the scoring record that he somewhat forgot he was in a golf tournament.
And all of a sudden, a few errant shots later, he's got a fight on his hands, and he had to make a tricky putt on the last hole just to get in the playoff, which he lost the next day.
Even Sam Snead, whose 82 wins ranks first all-time, had problems sealing the deal. So did Nicklaus, who won a record 18 majors, but finished second 19 times. One that was particularly frustrating for the Golden Bear came in 1971 at the U.S. Open.
Trevino finds himself tied with Nicklaus going to an 18-hole playoff, and he hauls the rubber snake out of the bag on the first tee and throws it at Jack and unnerves Jack.
There it is, the United States Open champion, Lee Trevino.
The U.S. Open was Sam Snead's nemesis. He never won it in 1939 when he didn't really know where he stood. He thought he needed a birdie when he really only needed a par.
Ended up making a triple bogey. Now, nobody questions that Sam Snead's one of the greatest golfers of all time, but the fact of the matter is he never won the U.S. Open.
The greatest players in golf have all either failed or been beaten. It happens to all of them. Jack, Tiger, Arnold, they lose far more often than they win.
Reason number 5, sticks and stones. If they didn't break his bones, the name certainly hurt him.
When he came up short, yeah, they got on him. And more than once, you know, he would jaw with fans.
There was a famous incident in the '86 U.S. Open when a fan got on him.
He challenged a fan that, you know, said, "You're choking again, Norman."
My nature is to deal with something directly. So to me, the situation warranted for me to unload my frustrations. I had to deal with it straight away.
That was kind of the very first time we saw that kind of fan coming to golf courses. And I think guys were a little stunned and taken aback.
To be told year after year after year after year, you're a choker, that's got to affect you.
You've got to surround yourself with a certain bubble that's impenetrable. You try to. Nobody really is.
Nobody's immune to any criticism. You know, if someone's yelling out, "You're a choker," you hear it. And there's so much you can take. Do I blame Greg Norman for letting that bother him? No, not really, because he's human.
That brings us to reason number 4, Butch Harmon. After Norman's coach left him to team with Tiger Woods, the Great White's best days were behind him.
Butch Harmon meant everything to Greg Norman's game. When Butch Harmon went to Tiger Woods, those kinds of things bothered him.
With Harmon as his coach in 1993 and 1994, Norman won 7 tournaments, including a British Open.
Greg's swing changed quite a bit when he was working with Butch, and it became a lot more technically correct in that respect.
There was a difference, you know, there was a difference in results. His focus was that much better, that much more confident. Butch had this wonderful ability to make you laugh. And I connected with Butch.
He definitely felt the loss of not having Butch around to achieve that.
I respected Butch, and I knew his involvement with that young kid from California probably do him more the world of good than me being there as well.
Under Harmon, Woods captured 8 majors, while Norman, left out in the cold, never won another.
Harmon made a big difference, and there was obviously a lot of victories that disappeared after Harmon left.
Merv Norman. Greg's father, an electrical engineer, didn't support his son's career choice, even when he was the best in the world.
Greg came out of that sort of surfing culture. He loved to be free, he loved to sail. And from very, very early on, his father just couldn't deal with those sort of things at all.
Greg sensed that I wasn't all that keen for him to do it because is there any real future in life for them in playing golf?
Everything comes from his father. Because he was trying so hard to get his father to say, "Greg, I'm so proud of you."
You could see the tension, and I knew he was trying to show or prove to his father that he was worthy of being a success.
With a father who showed little interest in the game, Norman lacked the paternal touch that many golfers credit for lifting them from gifted to great.
It would have been a wonderful deal to have my father standing there on the 18th green winning my first tournament, absolutely. It was a huge motivational factor. I wanted to prove to my father, I will achieve my goals.
When you look at a Nicklaus and a Woods and what their dads meant to them, Tiger's father was the guy that led Tiger down from the first tee to the 18th green, metaphorically. Jack Nicklaus was the same type of thing. His father was his North Star that he followed in golf.
Tiger drew from his father inspiration, drew courage, drew commitment. If you draw correlations between the two, you can say that it would probably have given Greg more of an edge.
If his father had supported him all the way through, there's no telling how many majors he could have won.
That brings us to reason number 2, Jack Nicklaus. Norman desperately tried too hard to duplicate his idol, setting himself up for failure.
Everybody's got to have a role model. So Jack was that way for me.
Norman had a huge flame inside of him, trying to be as good or trying to be better than Jack Nicklaus.
I feel like Greg is in some ways almost a protege of mine in some ways. I mean, he grew up learning my lessons and my book. He's followed my career.
I've heard stories that, he tried to pull the club the same. He tried to do everything the same way.
Nicklaus was the first modern professional golfer to define his career by how he performed in the majors. There's no question that Norman really modeled his career on Nicklaus. He would focus more. He'd go to play Augusta and play the open sites and the British Open sites in advance so he could gear himself up.
I think the expectation was very high for Greg to live up to.
When Norman fell short time and again in the majors, he tried everything, from seeking spiritual enlightenment to a TV motivator in an effort to be like Jack.
He did a lot of reading and did some of that, Eastern way of thinking and that kind of stuff.
I do remember them at Augusta talking about how he visited with Tony Robbins and had helped him visualize winning and think about being positive on the golf course.
I never had a sports psychologist growing up. The conversation I had with Tony Robbins because I was intrigued. I listened to some of his tapes.
You can never blame somebody for trying too hard. I think you compliment them.
You can't blame Greg Norman for trying to live up to his idol, for trying to beat Jack Nicklaus, trying to be better than Jack Nicklaus.
Who are we to say that the guy was a failure based on the fact that he didn't turn out to be Jack? How is trying to be Jack Nicklaus a bad thing?
Golf happens, and it happened to Norman more than anyone.
There was this kryptonite to his Superman, and he just seemed to find it more than anybody else.
Norman got beaten on 2 miracle shots in 2 majors, in 2 consecutive majors.
The first came at the 1986 PGA Championship. Tied with Norman on the final hole, Bob Tway dumped his approach into a greenside bunker.
I didn't think he had a hope in hell of getting it up and down too. And I was just sitting back and just saw it. And when it landed on the green, I said to myself, well, this has got a little bit too much speed.
That is the shot of Bob Tway out of the bunker. It's in the hole! It's in the hole!
You want me to actually say what I thought when I saw the ball going in the hole? I said, oh, and it starts with an S and finishes with a T.
The one that was more devastating to him was the '87 Masters.
Norman hit the perfect putt to win that tournament on 18 at Augusta. How that ball didn't go in, I'm sure he still wonders.
He's in the playoff with Mize. Of course, Mize misses the green, a mile to the right on 11. Greg's right in front. Again, you're thinking it's over.
And I'm not even watching him chip. But start walking when the ball hits the green and starts rolling. And I thought, oh, that's carrying too much speed,
And I've never seen blood leave a face like it did of Greg Norman. He was just spent. He's our tragic hero out on the PGA Tour.
You talk about an energy-sapping, energy-draining shot of adrenaline. I'm squatting down on my haunches, getting all the reverberations coming through my body, and I went, I've never felt anything like that before in my life. That was a tough one to take.
I think it'd be one thing to lose to Jack Nicklaus. It's quite another thing to lose to Larry Mize and Bob Tway.
When a guy holds a bunker shot or a chip to win a tournament, it hurts. Major championship level, it's got to stay with you forever.
Winning breeds winning. If things would have gone more his way, I don't think he ever would have lost the Masters to Faldo.
If he was to win those 2 majors, he was flying, and 4 might have turned into 10, might have turned into 12.
And if those 2 shots don't go in, then you go Jones and Hogan and Nicklaus and Norman and Tiger. I think that's what it does for him. Because not only does it give him 2 more majors, he's also 3 legs to the Grand Slam.
You gotta be kidding me! How many times can Greg Norman take it?
Got a whole list of players, who basically, put him away in a situation where there was nothing he could do about it. But you can't really blame Greg because you can't play defense in golf.
You go, man, the guy snaked it, I think it's just golf.
Golf happens, but more than anybody else that I can recall, it happened to Norman.
Had Tway and Mize not made their great shots, history might have looked kinder at Norman, but it was not to be. We hope we've given you some new insight into golf's version of Sisyphus. I'm Brian Kenny. Thanks for watching.